The Tower of Babel, confusion of tongues. The higher you go up the levels of abstraction, the closer you get to the ceiling of thought, the resolution limit of reality, and the more confused the language gets, turning back on itself in tighter and tighter loops as it approaches the event horizon, until it loses all meaning, or we realize it never had any meaning. Meaning was always relative meaning, relative to itself, and it collapses in on itself like it's imploding inside a black hole. It's also the same as the Ouroboros eating its own tail. As we circle closer and closer to explaining why we are here, why things are the way they are, the words have less and less meaning. And mentally, conceptually, the representations become more and more stretched and contorted until they're under so much tension they just snap and collapse in on themselves. The confusion. The words, the concepts, the language, which is the matrix of the mind, just folds in on itself. It can't support the weight it's being put under, and all linear thought collapses. Because the words themselves are inherently meaningless. This becomes obvious if we repeat the same word over and over again, until it is just a feeling of movement in our mouth, a foreign sound which holds no significance. The more we repeat the word, the further away we move from any significance relative to other words. The word, the sound, only contained meaning relative to other sounds, or in the context of other words. Alone, we see that it is inherently meaningless and arbitrary, unrecognizable to our mind as a meaningful representation of experience. The word is a sound, like a single note of music. A musical note holds no inherent emotional content. Meaningful interpretation is only possible in the context of other notes. There is no meaning in the actual notes, only in the spaces between the notes. The position of notes relative to one another. The experience of the indescribable formation is the music. All meaning is relative and only emerges in context. This demonstrates to us that the meaning, the experience, does not originate at the level of the notes or at the level of the words, the level of the mind, but at an unseen level of force which manipulates the notes, or words, or minds, into indescribable formations of meaning. Like grains of sand on a vibrating plate, or iron filings arranged by an unseen magnetic field. And the reason the snake is eating its own tail, and the reason the tower can't support its own weight, is because we are trying to explain why things are the way they are, from inside why things are the way they are. A simulation of why we are here in the future, how we got there. It's trying to explain why things are the way they are from inside a simulation of why things are the way they are. And you, or who you think you are right now, you are the simulation, which was created to determine why things are the way they are, which is trying to explain why things are the way they are. It's like holding a hand mirror and twisting it around and around, trying to see the hand mirror in the mirror. Or like a snake eating its own tail. Or like building a tower so high that you've used up the entire ground of the earth it stands upon, and have to start taking blocks from the base of the tower to continue building the top, which is the resolution ceiling. You've maxed out the resolution of meaning, which exists in the simulation. You've used up all the processing power, and you're just bumping your head up against an invisible barrier at the edge of the simulation. And by simulation, I don't mean a computer simulation. I only mean a smaller world within a bigger world. A limited virtual environment within an unlimited organic environment. The tree of the smoking mirror. An inverted tree of impossibilities, growing into imaginary space. Branching out into every conceivable what if. Every conceivable failed configuration of existence, in an attempt to answer the unanswerable pair. Why and why not? The tree of the smoking mirror, the tree of impossibilities, which diverges at a right angle from the eternal trees of what is and what could be, into a tangential netherworld of endlessly tessellating hypotheticals. Inverted reflections depicting what is not and what never will be. The simulation of impossibilities, of what cannot be, must exist within an eternal environment of what is and what can be. And an eternal world must be like a perfect circle, where all the members, or all the parts, fit together, or work together perfectly. All the parts are in perfect harmony, perfect unison. Because even the smallest imperfection, dissonance, extrapolated out into eternity, would result in destruction. Like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or some structure in which a small resonant vibration continuously builds up over time until it becomes a violent oscillation, which eventually fractures the structure and destroys it completely. And so, in order for the eternal world to exist in perfect harmony, there must be an omnipresent organizing force to hold it in that perfect circle. A force we could call God, which is obvious at all times. An organizing force. A force of order, of harmonious vibration, and an endless source of energy which sustains the eternal world. This force maintains the only hierarchy that can exist eternally, which is this perfect circle. Nothing above anything else, but everything perfectly cooperative with everything else. Perfectly codependent and in perfect unison. Under one perfect unifying force of order and source. And all parts in equal relationship to it, like any point on the circumference of a circle in relation to the center of the circle. But we are in the inversion of that eternal environment. We are in the entropic environment, time, where the omnipresent force is chaos, decay, loss, degradation, destruction. The source of all things in this world is what we could call the anti-God, the source of all loss and disorder, disharmony. The force of evil is the proof of the anti-God, and the anti-God is the proof of the original God. Both good and evil disprove materialism, but we are in the simulation of what is not eternal, what could not be. The tree of the smoking mirror, the tree of impossibilities. The force of order and life and source of all creation in that eternal world is like the linchpin of that perfect circle. And when you remove that linchpin, the circle becomes like a slinky. It falls apart, spiraling down endlessly, sinking into the netherworld of impossibilities. Why and why not? But the impossible force of evil in this world is the inverted reflection of the inescapable force of good in the eternal world. Evil disproves materialism because there is no logical, rational explanation for evil. Real evil, a pure force of just chaos and destruction, cannot be explained by evolution or the causal chain of materialism. It serves no purpose, no function. Greed, drugs, instinct, survival should not produce evil. Evil is proof of our fallen state. Evil disproving materialism also shows us that this world is an inversion of the real world, or heaven, or eternal world. It is pointing to the whole world being a lie, not real. By evil disproving materialism, I mean it doesn't follow logically any material cause. It serves no evolutionary purpose. It is completely irrational, not motivated by greed or survival. So it actually proves the unreality of physicality. But specifically, it proves we are in a copy, an inversion of something else, some original creation. Because even though physicality would still be an illusion in that original reality, still a product of the underlying, unseen spiritual cause of experience. It would be obvious that the physicality wasn't primary because there would be so much good, so much abundance and growth, that it would be obvious that it couldn't proceed rationally from the physical level, but must be caused and sustained by an unseen creator. An unseen level of existence. We need a small measure of resistance in order to provide the contrast we need for experience. In order for experience to be real, we need that contrast, that friction. But it could be a constant movement upward, a perpetual growth of change, an eternal expansion of meaning. But what we have here is the exact opposite. It is the inversion, copy, or imitation of the original creation. Physicality must always be an illusion, a projection from a higher level. But here it is shown to be an illusion by the massive overabundance of evil. There is still this irrational, unexplainable spiritual force, but it is overwhelmingly loss, disease, death, destruction, with just a little bit of supernatural goodness and growth sprinkled in to provide the contrast that we require for experience to be real. But if it is an illusion on the physical level either way, and physicality being an illusion or not being real, again, the words lose meaning at this level of abstraction. It's not that it's not a real experience, but it is emergent. The physical level of experience is not primary. It is emergent from a more fundamental level, what we could call a spiritual level. But the point is, if it's an illusion on the physical level either way, then why wouldn't it be the other way? An overabundance of supernatural good, of endless growth and love and more creation, rather than endless loss and destruction. That's the proof that we fell in a hole and need a hand to get out. That's how we know that we are responsible for our own predicament, somehow. And in order to get out of our present state, we need to take responsibility for it. Repenting means taking responsibility for your actions. Accepting responsibility is correspondent with regaining power. That is the relevance of original sin. It's not about feeling guilty. It's about rejecting victim mentality, rejecting the illusion of powerlessness. This entire reality, this entire world is the outward collective projection. It's the outward projection on the collective level of the victim mentality on the individual level. It's the collective representation of an individual victim mentality projected out at large as a collective reality. And the reason we need a hand out of the hole, is because we are not God. We don't want to be God. Being God is being all alone. Becoming God is solipsistic insanity. To become God would be to be sealed all alone in a bottomless pit, sealed alone for eternity in an abyss. If you are God, there's no collective experience. In order to have that eternal environment, that collective experience, we need one unifying force, the center of that perfect circle, an organizing force, so that no point on the circle is above any other point, but all are in equal relationship to that center point, the source of creation, the source of order, the source of energy, the source of life. And as soon as we reject the illusion of powerlessness, as soon as we accept responsibility and accept the hand pulling us out of the hole, we are immediately empowered. If you profess powerlessness, you are powerless. If you believe you are responsible, you are empowered. Automatically. To not accept responsibility is to either say, no, I am not in a hole, which is insanity, or to say, it's not my fault I'm in a hole, which is professing a belief in complete powerlessness. If you are in power, then there is nothing that is anyone else's fault. There's only your choice. And it's not a punishment or a reward. The accepting of personal responsibility is contingent, simultaneous with power, regaining or remembering power. The perception that we have to do something to then get something is a perception in time. It is a product of the fallen world, the Y machine, and the splitting of our consciousness. When the truth is that experience is simultaneous. The accepting of responsibility is simultaneous with the empowerment, the regaining or remembering of power. Accepting that you always had the power is simultaneous with regaining the power. A lack of personal responsibility proves an inability to handle power. It is automatic and mutually contingent. A refusal to accept responsibility is admitting powerlessness and also proves you shouldn't have power. And taking responsibility is admitting or affirming or remembering that, yes, I have power and am responsible for this situation. So, by accepting responsibility, you simultaneously gain and accept power back to yourself that you gave away in order to play the game, to play the victim and engage voluntarily in unawareness. That's what this reality, this game, this simulation, this fallen state is. It's a voluntary unawareness we have engaged in, which is analogous to the victim mentality individually. We are in the outward collective projection of an individual victim mentality. Out of the corners of his eyes, he perceived the ubiquitous gawkers, and the tens crowded close, and God knows how many hundreds or thousands further out. Perched thick in the trees and mountain rocks, like roosting flocks of heavy birds. Solid in silver, and half-solid in smoke and shadow, flitting uncomfortably close, as if to tease him. Only to dart away cleverly when he jolted his head to look upon them directly. He wished to do them violence with his gaze, and was driven to rage when they slipped away, escaping the blow of his shining fury. Dissolving again into webs of wind, and twitching leaves, and chattering dust motes. Communicating maddeningly in indescribable formations. He had the deep, burning sensation of being a poked bear in a suffocating circus cage, or an oblivious whore dancing in a glass box. The subject of alien lusts and curiosities, which he was incapable of comprehending, but could only dimly intuit through his gut and loins, as vague but overwhelming senses of shame and anger, which converged to a sharp point, a singular desire to extinguish life, to play stupid and docile, wide and drooling, to lure the cruel, giggling children close enough to snap shut in the vice grip of his jaws, and crush the laughter of their skulls into soft gravel.
Z of embers, immeasurable. C